while I was putting down the last 6 games that I'm going to be reviewing for this week, I decided to go and check at the first clip that I reviewed the first 6 games, and I found out something that not only just drives me absolute nuts, but it's something that I have done before and it annoys the hell out of me, and that is that I forgot to put the microphone on when I was reviewing the first 6 games. So basically what I said in the first 6 games that I was reviewing and that first clip, none of them was captured in the video. And it's something that, believe it or not, it happens more often or not to a YouTuber, where sometimes you forgot to check your video software that your microphone is actually off, and when that happens, it is very, very infuriating. Now, the good news is that actually happened only in the first 6 games. I mean, imagine if I didn't realize that. I finished doing the whole review and I found out that the microphone was actually off and nothing I said was captured in the video. Oh yeah, that would really make me super ragey and don't even want to do the review for this week. So that's the good news. The bad news is I have to redo the first 6 games that I'm going to talk about, and because I put the last 6 games first, I don't want to just erase it and just put back the first 6 games. So what I'm going to do this week is that I'm going to go backwards in terms of the review, and that I'm going to take a look at the last 6 games that happened this weekend action, and then do the first 6 games in the second clip, and when I switch the board. I mean, this just makes me this still drives me absolutely nuts that I had to do this, and now I'm going to have to spend a longer time to do this video than I should be in terms of doing the review video for this week. But the good news is the first game I'm going to be talking about is actually the game of the week and the craziest game of not only this week but probably this year. So, the Rapids and Montreal were involved in a 9-goal thriller where the Rapids won 6-3 against Montreal. And I actually felt bad for all the fans that actually missed this game because of the fact that, as I talked about in the preview, there was a plague that was going on around the stadium, and a lot of fans did not actually attend this game because they were worried that that plague is going to infect them, and that they of course missed out on a 9-goal thriller and also missed out the Rapids scoring the most goal ever in their franchise history. And that plague also seems to kind of inflicted that impact defense, because my goodness, that impact defense in this game and also their goalkeeper Evan Bush was a dumpster fire in terms of this game, and that in some way that plague also seems to make Kai Kamara kind of a superhuman in this game, because he had a crazy kind of game where not only he scored a hat trick in this game and score only his second hat trick in his career, but he technically scored 4 goals in this game. Because the first goal that he scored was an own goal, and own goal is going to be something that I'm going to be talking about a lot throughout this week, especially in the first 6 games, because that was one of the big storyline of this week, where we had a lot of own goals that happened this week. But Kamara, of course, scored the own goal to give Montreal a 1-0 lead at that point, but then Evan Bush decided that he's going to join the own goal party by scoring one of his own. And, the Kamara one, that one kind of really reminds me of the fact that a couple of weeks ago when the Rapids were playing against the Timbers, and how, you remember how Tommy Smith decided to basically head it into his own net with a superior kind of header. It was kind of similar with Kamara, kind of when the ball was coming in from a corner and he basically heads it. And it was a very good kind of header, if only it was actually directed toward the opposition net, but not into his own net. So that was kind of something similar to that. But the Evan Bush own goal was kind of unfortunate, where when the ball was kind of bounced toward him, he kind of fell down, and as he fell down, the ball actually hits him, and then it ricocheted right into the back of the net. So the Rapids, of course, were at level term, and that it seemed like we are back to honors even in terms of the own goal kind of battle that both of these teams were having. Now, Kamara, of course, then scored his first of what would be 3 goals this game with a penalty to give the Rapids a 2-1 lead. Then 1 minute into stoppage time, Kamara scores from Shinishiki to give the Rapids a 3-1 lead. And just as you thought that was the last scoring of the half, nope. 3 minutes later, Rubio scores from a corner from Jack Price to give the Rapids a 4-1 lead heading into halftime. I mean, I don't think it feels like I'm living in a parallel universe. The fact that I see a Rapids team score 4 goals in the first half. I mean, when's the last time the Rapids have able to put 4 in the back of the net in the first half? Now, in the second half, the Montreal started to come back into this game. And they start to come back into this game when Urruti scored from Ronry to give them a 2-goal deficit to fight with. Then Taidier scores on a penalty to pull within 1 goal in this game, and all of a sudden, that Rapids lead that they had at halftime, and it looked very comfortable as they head into the second half. It doesn't seem very comfortable now, the fact that it is now 4-3 heading into the last 14 minutes, and that this could be a very nervy moment for the Rapids in the last 14 minutes. But thankfully, 2 minutes later, those nervy kind of moment seems to disappear because Shinishiki scores from Jack Price, and guess what? This goal was once again scored from the set piece, which has been something that the Rapids have been super good at this season. Like, I swear, this team, if there is a stat line in terms of the most set piece that each MLS team scored, which I think there's definitely a stat lines on that, although I seem to search everywhere on Google and also search everywhere on the league website, but they just don't show the stat line for the most set piece that was scored in a season or so far in the season. But I think the Rapids probably lead that chart because they just seem to always score a set piece every single game, and here they are again scoring 2 set pieces, and that Shinishiki, of course, give the Rapids a 2-goal lead up to that point. Then Gamora scores to make it 6-3 in favor of the Rapids, and also completes his hat trick from Jack Price. And I'll tell you what, as much as the storyline of this game is that Kai Kamara, of course, scored a hat trick in this game, let's also give a little credit to Jack Price, who also kind of had a hat trick in this game too in terms of assists, and that he had 3 assists during this game. So, yep, that is, of course, the final score of this game as the Rapids had a crazy 6-3 victory against the Impact. And the shots in this game, talk about how this game was very crazy. The stat lines was also very crazy too, because there's only 12 shots compared to 14 that Montreal has, and only 7 shots on goal compared to 4 that Montreal has. There was only 11 shots on goal for both of these teams, and yet 9 of the 11 shots on goal in this game went into the back of the net. Talk about being clinical in terms of this game. Like, both teams, they only only had 1 shot on goal in this game that actually did not find into the back of the net. And it also said the fact that both goalkeepers were definitely not on their game. Now, in terms of shots off target, both teams had 5 shots off target. Montreal had 5 shots that was blocked compared to none that Colorado has. And Montreal had 53% possession compared to 47% possession that the Rapids had. And, the Rapids, this was definitely an emphatic victory for them. Although, despite the fact that they had an amazing victory against the Impact, somehow, in some way, they're still at the bottom of the Western Conference. And that has to be disappointing if you're a Rapids fan where, we, of course, won 6-3 against Montreal, and we put in one of the best performances we ever had in our franchise history, but we still find ourselves at the bottom of the Western Conference, even with this win. And as for Montreal, so much for what I said last week where, hey, winning 4-0 against the Union, maybe this is finally the spark because they have Piatti back in this game, which Piatti, for majority of this game, was pretty invincible. And that they also have Lassi Lappinen scoring goals for them, and maybe they finally found that goal score that they needed. Lappinen did not score a goal in this game, or did he had a lot of chances of scoring a goal in this game too. So, for the Impact, I don't know what to say other than the fact that their playoff chances is definitely started to diminish, and it doesn't help from the fact that there are some teams that is behind them that wants to get that sixth spot, and that if they don't continue to have these kind of performance, then something tells me that the Impact is not going to make the playoffs, which if you're an Impact fan, that is got to be very disappointing considering the fact that this team for majority part of the season, and actually I think every single week since the beginning of the season, Montreal still have not found themselves below the red line, and that they are really in danger of that if they continue to put these kind of performances. Now, moving on into the next match is RSL. What a big victory this is for RSL, winning NYCFC 3-1 in this game. And, I thought in this one, this was going to be a daunting task for RSL to get all 3 points because NYCFC was coming into this game red hot, and that they are considered one of the best team in the Eastern Conference, even though they're technically in the fifth spot in the Eastern Conference. And it looked like NYCFC was going to win this one comfortably because they got the first goal 4 minutes in when Alexander Ring scores from Anton Tinnerholm to give NYCFC a 1-0 lead, and it looks like a thrashing is about to happen, but RSL brought it back to level pegging when Savarino scores from Beckerman and Rusnak to tie the game at 1 apiece. Now in the second half, there wasn't really much that was going on for the first 25 minutes of the game, but then Rusnak broke the deadlock with a spectacular goal from Beckerman, and I should have put here perhaps goal of the week nomination because that was a spectacularly good hit from him outside the box to give RSL a 2-1 lead. And RSL would wrap up all 3 points when Beasler scores from Savarino to make it 3-1 in favor of RSL. And in terms of the shots in this game, RSL had 13 shots compared to 11 that NYCFC had. 4 shots on goal compared to 7 that NYCFC had. 5 shots off target compared to 4 that NYCFC had. 4 shots that was blocked compared to none that NYCFC had. And RSL had 52% possession compared to 48% possession that NYCFC had. And, like I said, this is a massive victory for RSL. Not only the fact that in some way you could kind of say that this was a bit of an upset against an NYCFC team that, have been doing very well for this season and have only lost 3 times this season, but the fact that, with some of the teams around them lost and that they were able to win this game, they now once again find themselves back above the red line and that they're now got themselves in that 6th spot. So a massive win for RSL that could boost their chances of making the playoffs. And as for NYCFC, yes, they do have still a lot of games in hand, and that with all those games in hand against the team that's above them, they theoretically still could go to the top of the Eastern Conference. But like I said before, it doesn't matter the fact that you have these games in hand, and that if you don't win your games in hand, it really doesn't matter of the fact that you could be a top team in the Eastern Conference because, next up, the Quakes. So they drew 1-1 against Columbus at home, and as a Quakes fan, not only this was 2-point drop in this game, but this felt like a loss for the Quakes because I knew coming into this game that the Quakes were on a 4-game winning streak and that they have been red hot coming into this game, and that they're facing against a Columbus team that, yes, they have won back-to-back games, but it's still a team that is near the bottom of the Eastern Conference, and that the Quakes are really good at home. I would think that this should be easy 3 points for the Quakes, but that was not the case. And in fact, I really think that this was one of the worst performances that the Quakes have been putting in these last couple of months. Because in the first half, we had a couple of chances of potentially putting the ball into the back of the net, but we couldn't do that, and that it also showed that there was a couple of times where they struggle in terms of breaking down this Columbus low block, and that we got caught on the counterattack a couple of times. But we did get the opening goal in the 41st minute, and for the first time this season, a penalty was given to the Quakes. And it's hard to believe, but the Quakes coming into this game was the only team in MLS this season to have not given a penalty. That all changes in this game when it was given because of a handball off of one of the Columbus player. I believe it was on, oh God, I forgot who exactly it was on, but it was a penalty that was given for us, and Eriksson, of course, make no mistake, and buries that one to give us a 1-0 lead. And then in the second half, I thought we had plenty of chances of getting the second goal, and missing chances was really one of the biggest reasons why we did not get 3 points in this game, because there was definitely a lot of chances that we had in terms of putting the ball into the back of the net, but for whatever reason, we aren't able to put away those chances. And how many times this season I have been saying, when you don't put your chances away, it's going to come back to haunt you. And it came back to haunt the Quakes, because in the 65th minute, our defense basically switched off, and that allowed Zardes score from Luis Diaz to give Columbus the equalizer and tie the game up at 1 apiece. And, the main culprit in terms of that poor defending from the Quakes is Goran Kasia, who basically decided to switch off and decided to not track Zardes and let him have a free header. And when you let Zardes have a free header in the box, yeah, game over. He's going to put that one into the back of the net. So at that point, it was tied at 1 apiece. And then Espinoza actually went off about 12 minutes left in the game after suffering an injury from a rough challenge on Akam. And I'll tell you what, David Akam, he is very lucky he did not get sent off in this game. Like, I have seen, like, originally they said that it should be a yellow card, and I didn't really see any replay of the challenge that Akam did on Espinoza, but when I saw the replay a couple of times after the game, yeah, that should have been a red card on Akam, because he basically went studs up and he basically just put an ankle kind of snapper on Espinoza on that challenge, and that could have easily broke Espinoza's leg. And I'm hoping Espinoza is okay and that he did not suffer a very serious injury, because that was a nasty kind of challenge that he suffered, and that, losing Espinoza is a big no-no for the Quakes, and it's a big blow for the Quakes too, because he is our most important player on this team. And you saw how in the last 12 minutes, without him on the pitch, the team really struggled in terms of producing anything going forward on the attack, and therefore we weren't able to get that crucial second goal to retake the lead. And that, of course, was the final score of this game, as the game ends up in a 1-1 draw. And in terms of the shots in this game, the Quakes had 19 shots compared to 9 that Columbus had, 6 shots on goal compared to 1 that Columbus had, 8 shots off target compared to 6 that Columbus had, 6 shots that was blocked compared to 2 that Columbus had, and the Quakes had 63% possession compared to 37% possession that Columbus had. But the Quakes were not being clinical in terms of their finishing, and therefore they dropped points at home. And that, anytime when you drop points at home, it's not a good thing to do. But when you drop points at home against a team that is not very good in this season, and that they're near the bottom in terms of the standings, that is definitely a killer blow. And that I really hope at the end of the season, if the Quakes did not get home field advantage heading into the first round of the playoffs, or the fact that the Quakes does not make the playoffs at all, which, believe it or not, it's still a possibility that the Quakes could miss the playoffs. And I know there are a couple of people keep saying to me that, the Quakes, it's still unlikely, the fact that they're going to miss the playoffs. I will argue and say that we're only 5 points above the red line, and knowing the fact that we have that incredibly tough September schedule, yeah, don't count out the fact that the Quakes could actually miss the playoffs, and that, if we do not head to that September in a very good form, we could easily slip down the table, and that this a season that looks to be very promising a couple of weeks ago could easily just derail in these next 2 months, which I'm really hoping that will not be the case. And I'm really hoping that this is just one of those games that the Quakes just could not put the ball into the back of the net, and that maybe in the next one they, of course, would be able to do that. But having said that, I said the same thing before in our last loss against Minnesota, where I said it was just one of those games where we just could not put the ball into the back of the net, and that the opponent goalkeeper was very good, which the Columbus goalkeeper was also doing a very good job in terms of coming up with big save. But I said that before, and it still happened with the Quakes. So yeah, I do have a little bit concern about this team going forward. But moving on into the next match, now heading into the Sunday game, is Minnesota. So the Loons is up to second in the Western Conference, and they, of course, got a 1-0 win over the Timbers to able to get to second in the Western Conference. And I think the talking point of this game has to be the penalty late in the game. But before I talk about the penalty, in the first half, I thought Portland were by far the better team, and that, Minnesota, they tried to do what other teams are starting to do with Portland, which is they decided to just kind of sit back and try to let Portland have all the ball, which in some way it kind of worked out a little bit, but at the same time Portland were still creating a couple of decent chances. And it also doesn't help the fact that Minnesota a couple of times just gives the ball away in their home half and gets trapped into that Portland press every time they try to play it out at the back. Now, in the second half, Minnesota did do a better job in terms of not giving the ball away, and did do a better job in terms of limiting the chances that Portland has, that they of course gave up in the first half. But really, they didn't create a lot themselves too, and it kind of started to become a very boring game until when we hit the 80th minute mark, where that's when chances started to come by, and that I feel like with 10 minutes left in this game, both teams realized that there's got to be, this game is definitely up for grabs, and that I better show some desperation so that I can get all 3 points out of this game. And, Portland had a chance to get the go-ahead goal when Brian Fernandez, who was very quiet in this game, pins one off the post that could have given the Timbers a 1-0 lead. And then 5 minutes later, Mason Toy had a chance to basically tap it in after the ball was coming into the box, and Toy, with his full stretch, tried to tap it into the back of the net. Couldn't quite do that. It went wide. So the game stays at 0-0, and it looked like most likely this game is going to end scoreless. But that's when I get to the penalty, and that, of course, was the difference of this game, with Finley, of course, putting it away. But the question is, was that actually a penalty? And was that actually a handball on Mabiola? Because originally, the referee didn't call anything when the ball was coming in from a corner. It looks like Mabiola kind of handballed it. A lot of Minnesota player and also the Wonderwall was shouting for a handball. Referee originally didn't give it. They look on VAR, and they actually took a long time to look at that via VAR, and yeah, I mean, there's definitely argument to why that is not a penalty, because there was a couple of angle that I can see that it being not clear and obvious, but there was also some angle that you can clearly see that Mabiola, his hand was in an unnatural position, and that, of course, it hits him. So I thought, in some way that it feels kind of like a 50-50 call, and the referee decided to kind of benefit the 50-50 call in favor of Minnesota, and that, of course, gave Minnesota a penalty, which, like I said, Finley puts that one away. But I understand why Timbers fans are not going to be happy with this call, and I also understand why Giovanni Savarese, which after the game, he said that this was not a penalty, and that he basically explained when they showed multiple angle, it was not clear and obvious. And in some way, I do kind of agree with him, because, it did look like it wasn't clear and obvious, but there are also other angles that it did look clear and obvious. And this season with VAR, and in terms of the interpretation of clear and obvious, it's really hard to kind of understand what exactly it's clear and obvious, and that you could have some VAR referee think that it is clear and obvious, and then you can also have some VAR referee thinks that it's not clear and obvious whatsoever. So in some way, it's kind of like a coin flip, which fortunately Minnesota was able to benefit off of that. And yeah, that of course was the difference of this game, with Minnesota and Portland both had 15 shots in this game. 4 shots on goal compared to 5 that the Timbers had. 10 shots off target compared to 9 that the Timbers had. Both teams had 1 shot that was blocked, and the Timbers had 57% possession compared to 43% possession that Minnesota has. And with this loss, the Timbers does find themselves drop out of the playoff spot and find themselves below the red line once again. But I have no doubt that they're going to get back above the red line pretty soon, because after this game, and then also after when they play again each other on Wednesday in the U.S. Open Cup semifinal, they have a string of 10 straight home games. And that there's no doubt that doing those 10 straight home games, they are going to get enough points where they are not only just going to rise themselves above the red line, but they could really challenge in terms of the top 4 spot and get home field advantage heading into the playoffs. But yeah, moving on. So this was a game where both teams desperately need 3 points. And at the end of this day, it seemed like only one team really showed their desperation in terms of getting 3 points. And that team that showed their desperation in terms of getting 3 points was the Union. And they absolutely destroyed DC in this game. And they started the ass whipping in the 3rd minute when Bedoya scores from Fabian and Wooten. And Bedoya had a very interesting celebration where he first decided to celebrate with his teammate, but then he decided to grab one of the FS1 mic and basically said that stop gun violence, Congress do something. And, you know, I'm a guy that usually don't like talking about politics, and I'm a guy that usually don't like to see politics involved in sports. But at the same time, I have no problem seeing players share like their political viewpoint either on live TV or even off the pitch in terms of what they really feel that is going on in the political world right now. And, you know, whether or not if I think this, of course, would be effective, and whether or not if this is the right thing to do, you know, I'm going to really let you guys decide, because, again, I don't like to talk about politics, and, you know, talking politics on YouTube is literally a thin rope to walk on, and you do not want to do that on a YouTube kind of videos, which is why I'm going to let you decide whether or not if that was a good thing to do or not, or if that is kind of an effective message to send out in the political world, and seeing an athletes share their political viewpoint live on TV. And also thoughts and prayers in terms of what has gone on this past week, where we had a mass shooting today in Dayton, had a mass shooting yesterday in El Paso, and also had a mass shooting just a week ago around my area down in Gilroy. You know, the country have been ripped apart, and that this is pretty much the darkest time that this country has gone through in this past week since 9/11 happened about 14 years ago. But, you know, or not 14 years ago, but 18 years ago. But, yep, like I said, you know, I'll let you decide whether or not if this was a great idea or not. And I also wonder whether or not if Disco is going to do something about this, because the disciplinary committee and MLS in terms of the rules about politics can be a little bit tricky, because I've seen before MLS have been implement rules where, you know, these kind of symbols that has a political viewpoint, or these kind of symbols that has like Nazi kind of reference, is strictly prohibited. And an example of that is, I think this past week, I think it was the Sounders decided to ask the league to ask Portland to remove kind of like a symbol that they have at home that kind of resembles something kind of about Nazi involvement in World War II, or something that about Nazi trying to invade another country during World War II. So yeah, it's a very slippery slope in terms of the league interpretation in terms of politics, and I wonder what are they going to do with Bedoya, and that whether or not if they're going to decide to fine him heading into this week. But Yeah, going back to the game itself, the Union, of course, have a 1-0 lead against DC. And really, I think after that point, Philly pretty much just dominate throughout the game because DC, they just never got things going. And that goal kind of completely unraveled them because they were super disorganized and they gave the ball away so many times this game that I was kind of surprised the fact that the Union only scored 5 goals. Like, they had so many chances in this game because of giveaways that DC had. And, I really thought the game was really over in the 40th minute when Junior Marino, of course, was sent off after he commits a denial of goal score opportunity in the box. Originally, it was said it was going to be a yellow card, but when you look on the replay and when you look at how Marino didn't really play the ball there in the box, yeah, that obviously is going to be denial of goal scored opportunity. So he, of course, was sent off. Philly did have a chance to get the second goal there, and I was actually surprised that Kasper Shabilko decided to step up on this penalty because Marco Fabian is usually their penalty kick taker, and I have a feeling that Shabilko will never be allowed to take a penalty with this Union team ever again because he basically skies it into the supporter stand at Audi Field. Now, fortunately for Shabilko and the Union, they would eventually find that second goal before halftime, and it would be Fabian that scores from Wagner and Madunian to give them a 2-0 lead. Then Shabilko redeems himself in the second half when he scores from Crivello to give them a 3-0 lead. Now, DC did get one back from Briant to make it 3-1, and they really started to kind of play with some fruition, and I thought between minute 53 to around minute 69, that was really probably the best spell that DC had and really kind of put Philly off the back foot a little bit. But Fabian, of course, scored that fourth goal from Madunian to make it 4-1, and any chance of comeback after that goal was pretty much all but done. And really, at that point, that's when you can see that DC pretty much accept the fact that they're going to lose this one and that they're going to lose this one embarrassingly. And to make things worse, Philly eventually did add the fifth goal when Fafa Pico scores from Montero to make it 5-1. And in the end, it was the Union with an emphatic 5-1 victory over DC. And the shots in this game, 26 shots compared to 11 that DC had. 14 shots on goal compared to 3 that DC had. 9 shots off target compared to 7 that DC had. 3 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that DC had. And possession-wise, 60% possession compared to 40% possession that DC had in this game. And that this was just total dominance for the Union in this one. And that with this win, they get back above Atlanta in terms of that top spot in the Eastern Conference. And as for DC United, I mean, in some way, I can see this in 2 ways for DC in terms of this resort. One, you would say that this was an absolute embarrassing loss, and that something tells me that there are a lot of Ben Olsen kind of out-shout that is going on with the fans and say that he has really turned this team into a dumpster fire all of a sudden in these last couple of months. But on the other end, I would say that this might be a good wake-up call for DC. Like, DC, as I said, that they've been kind of in a bit of a dumpster fire in the last couple of months and just have looked very mediocre. Maybe this resort will really start to fire them up and really start to kind of light a fire under their belly and say that, hey, we just got absolutely embarrassed and that this cannot happen again, and that we got to really step up for the remaining part of the games that we have left, because there is still a very big possibility that we could potentially miss the playoffs this season. So, yeah, there's 2 ways that DC can look at this, and I'm pretty sure for DC United fan, they hope the second way is what these player is going to look at, and the fact that, hey, we got to wake up, because this just cannot happen again for the remaining of the part of the season, and that, now that we're at rock bottom of the part of the season, we need to start finding some way to try to get ourselves back up and trying to secure a spot in the playoffs. Speaking of playoffs, moving on into the next game is SKC. So, if it wasn't for the 6-3 thriller that Colorado and Montreal has, I would have said that this game would be the game of the week. And for SKC, my oh my, their playoff chances have all of a sudden come alive again, and that, you know, I knew that coming into this game there was a lot for me to ask for SKC to able to get all 3 points against Seattle, or even get a point against the Seattle Sounders, because they're playing on the road, which they have not been very good. But it turns out that they actually showed some fight in this game, and I think this game really is the first time that I seen the old Sporting KC self, and that I have finally seen a Sporting KC team that looked like last season, that was at the top of the Western Conference. And in the first half, Gutierrez gets SKC off to a good start from Sinovic to give them a 1-0 lead. Then Gutierrez, of course, scores on a penalty after Nuhu, of course, brought down Jerso. It was a silly kind of penalty to give away from Nuhu, and also this probably explains why he isn't really a regular starter anymore for this team, with him committing the silly mistake. And in the second half, Seattle did start to get back into this game, and they got one back when Jordan Morris scores from Nicolas Ladero to make it a 2-1 game. And at that point, you can feel the Sounders was potentially going to get that second goal and had the momentum to do it. And just as they were about to get that second goal, when I believe it was Morris trying to strike it, but it was blocked away, Sporting KC literally started a counterattack, and they literally start a lethal counterattack that completely cut open the Sounders defense. And a lot of that has to do with Eric Hurtado, who, of course, making his second appearance for SKC and making his first start for this team, made a very good run. And also, Jerso played a very good ball to Hurtado, but Hurtado made a very good run to just completely outpace Kim Ki-hee in terms of the back line, and then slots it home to give SKC a 3-1 lead. And that was a massive goal for Sporting KC, because at that point Sporting KC was really on the ropes with the way that Seattle really kind of started to threaten and potentially get the equalizer. But they got that third goal and restored their 2-goal advantage. And they think that it's pretty much done, and that they're going to walk out with all 3 points at CenturyLink Field and do something that not a lot of team has able to do against Seattle on the road. But in the 82nd minute, Morris scores from Bawana to make this a 3-2 game. And in the last 8 minutes, boy, Sporting KC was just holding on for dear life. And I'll tell you what, when Bawana hit that one off the post around the 89th minute, I bet Sporting KC fans just had a heart attack in that moment, because that was just inches away from putting it into the back of the net. And also, when that ball bounced off the post, it actually hits off of Jordan Morris, who knew nothing about it, and unfortunately he couldn't quite redirect that one into the back of the net. But, for Sporting KC, they just were able to survive in this game, despite the fact that Seattle were really putting a lot of pressure on them, and I really thought that they were eventually going to get that third goal. But they hang on in this game, and in terms of the shots in this one, Seattle had 14 shots compared to 10 that Sporting KC had, 5 shots on goal compared to 7 that Sporting KC had, 7 shots off target compared to 2 that Sporting KC had, 2 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that Sporting KC had, and Seattle had 65% possession compared to 35% possession that SKC had. And I thought for SKC, if they would have gave away that goal to Seattle late in the game and gave away that third goal to Seattle, they would have still walked out of CenturyLink Field with a point, which I think at the beginning of the game, a lot of SKC fan and certainly the player would take it. But considering the fact that they were 3-1 up and they were up for majority of the game, that would have been an absolute gut-wrenching for them. And that could have maybe even derailed their chances in terms of making their playoffs and their confidence of actually making the playoffs. But now that they got this big win against Seattle on the road, and now that they have a stretch where they're going to be playing a lot of teams that they are fighting for those playoff position, Sporting KC, this is why I say that I don't write them off because I feel like they are going to eventually find that spark that will drive them in terms of making the playoffs, and this game could be the one that will drive that spark for them to start a winning streak and get themselves back above the red line. And as for Seattle, this is a frustrating loss for them, and I believe now they have dropped back-to-back home games, which is, I think that's the first time that has happened in a long time for the Sounders. But I can also say that, the Sounders, they weren't in full strength in this game. They didn't have Rui Diaz or Victor Rodriguez in this game or Brad Smith in this game. So they were a little bit shorthanded coming into this one. But at the same time, it is disappointing the fact that they drop all 3 points at home. And all of a sudden, Seattle is only 5 points above the red line. And, I guess the only thing I won't be super worried about Seattle in terms of dropping below the red line, even though they're 5 points up, is that once they get back to full strength, this should be a team that belong in the top 3 of the standings in the Western Conference. But that being said, that is pretty much it for the last 6 games that I, of course, review. And usually I would say here, thank you for watching, but because what happened earlier where the first 6 games that I review and that I found out that my microphone is not working, I now have to switch the boards and once again review the first 6 games that happened this week. Alrighty, so now back to the beginning and talking about the first game that happened this week. And I know this does sound very strange because this is usually the beginning of the video, and because of the whole microphone issue that I talked about in the beginning of the video, that's why I'm going backwards this week. And now talk about the first game that happened this week, which was between Atlanta versus the Galaxy. It was Atlanta with a 3-0 win against the Galaxy in front of another record attendance at Atlanta. 72,500 plus people witnessed this game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and they witnessed their team Atlanta United winning 3-0 against the Galaxy. And we knew that the Galaxy coming into this game, there was a high chance that they weren't gonna get anything out of this one because they don't have Zlatan in this game because of suspension, and they also don't have Polenta in this game because of also suspension. And despite that, they actually started the game pretty well for the first 20 minutes and really put some pressure on Atlanta, but they couldn't quite find the opening goal. And then after that, that's when Atlanta realized that, they better step up their game and that, it is time to really start to pick it up. And they kind of got a little bit help in the 22nd minute when Romney, of course, scored an own goal. And then literally 21 minutes later, Gonzalez score an own goal. And you know how earlier I talked about this is the week of own goals? Well, here's an example of that in this game, where I think this is one of the 4 games this season that we have seen a team score an own goal have scored 2 own goal in a single game. And that, it's unfortunate with both of the own goals, and that both of the own goals were pretty similar, where the ball was coming into the box, and unfortunately one of the player basically stabbed it into his own net to, of course, conceded the goal. So at that point, it was 2-0 in favor of Atlanta, and I thought those 2 own goal, and especially the own goal that Gonzalez, of course, conceded, I thought that really deflated the Galaxy because that was right before halftime, and the fact that they were hoping they might get to halftime at 1-0 and maybe have a chance in the second half. The own goal, of course, happened, and that now they're down 2-0 heading into the second half, and that, that's when I feel like it might be a little bit too much for them to overcome, and that they kind of got a little bit deflated by that, and that in the second half, Atlanta really kind of took control of this game, and that the Galaxy never find that same rhythm that they had in the first 20 minutes, and didn't really had a lot of chance in the second half as they did for part of the first half. They, of course, won. Atlanta, of course, won a penalty about halfway through the second half after Giancarlo Gonzalez tripped Escobar. Originally, it wasn't actually going to be called a penalty, but they go to VAR to see whether or not if Gonzalez tripped him. He did. They, of course, overruled that call and give Atlanta a penalty, which Martinez was able to put it away and now tied for the most consecutive game with a goal, which surprisingly, he actually set that mark with Diego Valeri at 9 games consecutively with at least a goal just last year. And it's quite amazing the fact that, with Josef Martinez, we know that he is probably one, if not the most lethal striker in the league. But the fact that now, for the second season in a row, he has a stretch where he have scored at least a goal in 9 games. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. And I doubt anyone can really replicate what he has done in these last 2 seasons of him scoring a ton of goals, and also now have a chance to break his own record and stand at the top as the player to have scored the most consecutive game with a goal. And that, of course, was the final score of this game, as Atlanta, of course, had 20 shots in this game compared to 11 that the Galaxy had, 7 shots on goal compared to 4 that the Galaxy had, 8 shots off target compared to 4 that the Galaxy had, 6 shots that was blocked compared to the 3 that the Galaxy had, and Atlanta had 55% possession compared to 45% possession. And during this or after this game, they actually find themselves at the top of the Eastern Conference, but because the Union, of course, won 5-1 against DC the following day, they, of course, find themselves now back down to second. Although, I think they do have a game in hand over Philly, and that knowing the fact that they have been on a bit of a hot streak lately, Atlanta United, I have a feeling that it won't take long before Atlanta might reclaim that top spot in the Eastern Conference, which I think a lot of people knew that was eventually going to happen. Although I don't think a lot of people thought that it would take this long for them to finally get all the way at the top of the Eastern Conference. And as for the Galaxy, they're just going to have to shake off this loss because, it's a game that I feel like they knew that they weren't going to get anything out of it, and now they, of course, will have to travel to DC and looking to try to get 3 points. And really, right now, the Galaxy are in a pretty tough stretch where they have to play against teams that is desperate of trying to make the playoffs, and I also have heard that they have to play teams like LAFC and the Sounders again in the next couple of games. So it definitely does not get easier for the Galaxy, and that the Galaxy is starting to fall a little bit below the Western Conference table after they have now suffered consecutive losses again. But moving on into the next match is the Red Bulls. So the Red Bulls, of course, won 2-0 against Toronto, and this was really a game of two halves for both of these teams. And that in the first half, it was TFC that had all the chances to potentially get the opening goal. They couldn't put it away. And then in the second half, we basically just flipped the switch, and that it was the Red Bulls that had most of the chances. But unlike in the first half where Toronto wasn't able to put away their chances, the Red Bulls did. And they put away their chances in the 55th minute, and actually they didn't even score this goal. It was actually Mavinga who is the latest victim in terms of the tormented own goals that was scored during this week to give the Red Bulls a 1-0 lead. They could have made it 2-0 just 3 minutes later when Jakowski was clipped by Osorio inside the box, and that the Red Bulls, of course, got a penalty, and I thought for sure that was going to be 2-0 when I saw Daniel Royer stepped up, because he has never missed a penalty in his MLS career, but he missed it. And that of course is the first penalty that he has missed in MLS, and he unfortunately skied this one into the crowd, which makes me think that he probably was not confident in terms of stepping up for this penalty. And it was very unfortunate, the fact that the Red Bulls couldn't get that second goal, and that they had a chance to really put the game away. Although the good news for the Red Bulls is that Royer miss didn't really come back to bite them, because in the 89th minute, Justin Morrow, of course, got sent off because of a denial of goal score opportunity. And to really make sure that they got all 3 points in this game, Kamar Lawrence scores to make it 2-0 not deep into stoppage time, but into stoppage time in this game to make sure the Red Bulls get all 3 points against Toronto. And in terms of the shots in this game, the Red Bulls had 21 shots compared to 10 that TFC had, 6 shots on goal compared to 3 that TFC had, 8 shots off target compared to 6 that TFC had, 7 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that TFC had, and possession-wise, 35% possession compared to 65% possession that TFC has. And, this was really a game that I thought, the team that has that clinical finishing was able to get a win, and that was the case for the Red Bulls, as they were the side that were able to put away their chances, unlike TFC in the first half, unable to put away their chances. And for the Red Bulls, that definitely helped them in terms of trying to climb up the Eastern Conference, and also did bounce back after a bit of an embarrassing loss against the Columbus Crew in the last game at home. And as for TFC, this was definitely a big missed opportunity for them to get back above the red line, because as I'm about to move on into the next game between the Revs and LAFC, the Revs, of course, lost that one 2-0 against LAFC, and that, if TFC would have won this one, they would have got back above the red line, and the Revs would fall below the red line in this game. But, TFC, of course, didn't take advantage of it, and the Revs, of course, stay above the red line. But as I mentioned, they did lose to LAFC, and that for the first time in almost 3 months, they have suffered a loss in MLS. And in the first half, 8 minutes into the game, Diego Rossi scores from Jordan Harvey, and I was actually wondering whether or not if this was actually a shot or a cross, because when Rossi kind of chests that one down and he kind of trying to chip the goalkeeper there, I feel like he was intended to cross that one in the back post so that Vela, of course, can get to it, but unfortunately, Rossi kind of overhits it, but somehow, in some way, it still finds into the back of the net, and I'm pretty sure Matt Turner was kind of caught a little bit off guard, and the fact that he thought that that cross was going to go into the back post, or that cross was going to go over his net. That's why he kind of hesitated a little bit, and next thing that he knew that was going to end up into the back of the net. It was too late. It was over his head and goes into the back of the net. So that, of course, gave LAFC a 1-0 lead, and they could have made it 2-0 just before halftime, but Ferro did a great job to clear a shot off the line that Carlos Vela strikes. And originally, when I look at this live, I thought for sure that ball actually crossed the line, but when I look on the replay, it looked like Ferro did an amazing job to able to clear that one as the ball was about to cross the line. And at that point, the game stays at 1-0 for New England. Although in the second half, LAFC did had a couple of chances to get the second goal, but New England also had a couple of chances of getting the equalizer. And I thought, as long as if this game stays at 1-0 for New England, or 1-0 in favor of LAFC, New England's going to have a chance to get back into this game, and that they have a chance to get an equalizer in this. Unfortunately, they weren't able to keep this one at 1-0, and that eventually LAFC finally was able to get that crucial second goal, and they got it in the 72nd minute when Blessing scores from Harvey and Atuesta, and at that point, it was 2-0 for LAFC. And really, it was kind of game over for New England at that point. And it really showed in the last 18 minutes, where LAFC really dominate the last 18 minutes. And really, most of the chances that they had throughout this game came in the last 18 minutes, where they really put a shooting gallery in front of the New England net. And if it wasn't for Matt Turner making a couple of decent saves, and also the fact that LAFC wasn't very clinical in terms of those chances that they had in the last 18 minutes, this would have been even a more uglier scoreline than the 2-0 scoreline that this game ended. But in terms of the shots in this game, LAFC had 22 shots compared to 10 that New England has, 7 shots on goal compared to 1 that New England has, 6 shots off target compared to 7 that New England has, 9 shots that was blocked compared to 2 that that New England has. I know I didn't put 2 there, but just pretend there's like a 2 right there in terms of the block shot that New England has. And possession-wise, 57% possession compared to 43% possession that New England has. And unfortunately for the Revs, all good things has to come to an end, and that their unbeaten streak does come to an end there, and they weren't able to extend their unbeaten streak to break the record for the longest unbeaten streak in franchise history. But I guess if you're going to lose a game and that your unbeaten streak does have to come to an end, I guess it's only fitting that you do have to have your unbeaten streak come to an end when you're facing against the top team in MLS, that is LAFC. And LAFC in this game continue to just prove to us that they are the best team in the league, and that they are definitely going to win the Supporters Shield and might even break the record for the most point in a single season that the Red Bulls set last year. I believe they're only 7 wins away from breaking that record, which is quite remarkable because they still have about 12 games left this season, and that they don't even need to win all they need is to win more than half of the game, and they have the record, which also just shows you how good they have been this season. But moving on into the next match is Orlando. What a big win this is for Orlando City. And as I mentioned, with the fact that New England, of course, lost in that game against LAFC, Orlando City was one of the big beneficial in terms of the New England loss, because with them winning 2-0 against Dallas, and as I said before in the preview, they really need to win this game because the playoff chances was really slipping away. But with them winning this one, they actually are now, I think, only 5 points behind New England and started to kind of get back into the playoff picture. And in the first half, 13 minutes into the game, it was the former FC Dallas player Tesha Akindele haunt his team with a goal from Juan. And what a goal that was from Juan, that just played a beautiful ball to Tesha Akindele, and all Akindele need to do is just put that one into the back of the net, which is exactly what he did to give Orlando City a 1-0 lead. And Orlando City basically shut the door late in the game when Ascaris scores from Kleshton and Akindele to make it 2-0. And yeah, that is the final score of this game, as Orlando City had 9 shots compared to 11 that Dallas had. Both teams had 3 shots on goal, 6 shots off target compared to 7 that FC Dallas had, 0 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that Dallas had, and Dallas had 64% possession compared to 36% possession that Orlando City has. And something that I'm starting to find a little bit interesting with Orlando City, besides the fact that they have been very inconsistent this season, and that this performance just proves to everyone that they are such an unpredictable team, and that you just don't know which Orlando City will show up in each of the games. But one thing that I have started to find very interesting with Orlando City is that it seems like every time when they do not have a lot of shots in game, and that they have a low amount of shots, they usually win those games. But when they have a lot of shots, and when they had 18 or 20 shots in a game like 2 weeks ago against the Red Bulls, they lose those games, which is kind of fascinating to see. But at the same time, I guess that also kind of explained the inconsistency with Orlando City, of the fact that sometimes they can be one of the most deadliest finishing team in the league with them taking chances of the chance that they of course have, but sometimes they could also be very wasteful, and that they could be just playing on snake bit like what they did in that game against the Red Bulls. So yeah, that's a very kind of interesting kind of pattern I see with Orlando City this season. And there's no doubt that I think if they want to make the playoffs this season, not only they need to have more performance like this, but they need to win more home games like this. It's hard to believe, but Orlando City, this is one of the, I think this is the 6th or 7th win that they had this season at home. And the fact that They haven't won at home for a while now until this victory against Dallas. So, yeah, they need to, of course, win those home games and maybe get a couple of resort on the road so that they can, of course, make the playoffs. And speaking of the playoffs for Dallas, yeah, that playoff kind of hope is definitely slipping away with this loss. And as much as I said that this, of course, game means more to Orlando City in terms of the playoffs than Dallas, this also equally means important for Dallas too, because with the Western Conference being so tight and that it seemed like every single week every teams in the Western Conference tends to win a game, and that if you do not win a game in the Western Conference, then it could definitely have a big consequences in terms of you dropping down the table. And in this case, Dallas of course dropped down to 7th place in the Western Conference and just above the red line. But if every team have played the same amount of game in the Western Conference, and by the end of the year, Dallas would actually find themselves below the red line because they have played more games than anybody else that is around them in terms of the playoff picture, and that Portland would have just jumped them over in terms of the playoff spot because they have a game in hand over Dallas, and that Portland is only 1 point behind Dallas as we speak. But moving on into the next match is Cincinnati. Well, this was tough luck for Cincinnati in this game against Vancouver, where, in the sad derby, unfortunately, they, of course, are coming out as the side that feel not only very sad, but also feel like they deserve more in this game. Because they lost this one to Vancouver 2-1, but it felt like FC Cincinnati was by far the better team in this game. And they actually got off to a great start in this game, with them scoring 6 minutes in when Alan Cruz scores for Maddox and Duplan to give them a 1-0 lead. And that they had a lot of chances to potentially get the second goal, but Juan Imbon scores his second goal of the season for Vancouver, and it was an amazing goal that he has scored, where he basically get outside the box and kind of put it in traffic. I was kind of also surprised the fact that wasn't actually deflected, because when he struck that one into traffic, there was at least 5 or 6 guys in the box ready to try to block that one, but it went into the back of the net and gives the equalizer for Vancouver. But FC Cincinnati had chance, like I said, of the fact that they had chances to get the second goal. They came so close of getting that second goal, and that Alan Cruz himself almost got his second goal of the game when he hits the post right on the stroke of halftime, and we head to halftime tied up at 1 apiece. And then in the second half, same thing. FC Cincinnati had many chances of getting the second goal, and they also hit the post in the second half. And this was actually a spectacular strike from Duplan, where he basically strike a volley from about 40 yards out. And usually when you see players strike a volley from about 40 yards out, you would think that the player basically decided to chip the goalkeeper, which I'm pretty sure when you look on the replay of that, that's exactly what Duplan decided to do when he seen Maxime Crepeau kind of came off his line. But the way that he struck this ball, this was anything but a chip. This was an absolute rocket that unfortunately hits the top of the post, and that could have easily been the second goal for FC Cincinnati. And if that actually went in, I have a feeling that is going to be the goal of the week, with the way that Duplan hits that one from way out of the box. But as much as FC Cincinnati has a lot of chance in this game, they unfortunately got hit with a sucker punch, and that in the 84th minute, Felipe scores his first goal for Vancouver this season from Talbot and Adnan, completely against the run of plays, and Vancouver, just like that, has a 2-1 lead, which they were able to hold on. And in terms of the shots in this game, this will tell you why FC Cincinnati was the better team and had more of the chances, because they had 20 shots compared to 10 that Vancouver has, twice as amount of shots that they had compared to Vancouver, 3 shots on goal compared to 5 that Vancouver has, 12 shots off target compared to 4 that Vancouver has, 5 shots that was blocked compared to 1 that Vancouver has, and possession-wise, 59% possession compared to only 44% possession that Vancouver has. And that, for FC Cincinnati, this was just one of those games where unfortunately they had the chances but they couldn't put it away, and the other team was able to put away their chances when they needed to do so, and that is the reason why they of course lost this game. And for the Whitecaps, they kind of stole this one out of FC Cincinnati, and at least the good news is that means now they are no longer the team with the fewest win in MLS, although they're still tied. They're now tied with FC Cincinnati in terms of the fewest wins in MLS, but at least that gives them a little bit confident of what has been just an absolute disaster kind of year, and that I also expect them to make a lot of changes heading into this offseason. And you can also set the same thing with FC Cincinnati too. Finally, moving on to the final game that I'm going to be reviewing is Houston. We have a problem. And I don't mean that in a cliche kind of way, but I mean in terms of their playoff chances. Because with them losing 1-0 against the Chicago Fire in a game that they absolutely had to win if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive, they don't do it. And the only goal in this game was Nemanja Nikolic scoring from Nico Gaitan right on the stroke of halftime. And my, oh my, when is the last time that Nikolic has scored a goal for this team? Like, it feels like it's been an eternity since Nemanja Nikolic have scored a goal for this team. And to think that 3 years ago, he scored 24 goals in a season and only came 3 away from then tying the record that Wando and BWP own in terms of the most goal in a single season, to now just struggling in terms of putting the ball into the back of the net and also getting benched this season. My oh my, he has really took a fall from grace ever since he has joined the Chicago Fire. But the good news is he finally puts one into the back of the net, and hopefully this goal will really help his confidence, and hopefully this will be the beginning of him scoring a couple of more goals for this Fire team, because they really need it from him. So at that point, it was a 1-0 lead for the Fire. And then in the second half, they had a chance to make it 2-0, and the best chance that they could have made it 2-0 was a very FIFA 19-like kind of moment where there was a mad scramble in front of the net, and somehow, in some way, it does not result in the Fire's second goal. And that it all started when Dax McCarty trying to tap it in, but not only it hits the post, but it actually hits both sides of the post. And then when the ball bounced back on the second side of the post, it basically was just dangling literally just 2 yards out of the net. And I believe there was like 4 Fire attacker and 4 Dynamo defender, including Joe Willis, trying to either clear it away, and that those Fire attack was trying to maybe tap it into the back of the net. And somehow, in some way, the Dynamo was able to clear it, and I have no idea how that did not go into the back of the net. And I can also say that that moment that the Chicago Fire wasn't able to put that chances away really just summarized their season this year, because they have found some crazy way this season in terms of not able to put the ball into the back of the net, and that they have come so close so many times this season with their chances that they have created, that what if they actually took their chances? And what if that not only that goal actually went in, but all, or not even all, but at least 3/4 of those chances that they had in majority of the games that they have played this season actually went in, and they were able to put away? This team would not be in this position, and that this team would not be in a turmoil as they are in right now. So yeah, that has to be very frustrated at that moment for the Chicago Fire, but fortunately for them, they of course still were able to hang on, as Houston didn't really offer much throughout this game. And that in the end, in terms of the shots in this game, Houston had 14 shots compared to 15 that Chicago has. 4 shots on goal compared to 3 that Chicago has. 4 shots off target compared to 9 that Chicago has. 6 shots that was blocked compared to 3 that Chicago has. And possession-wise, 56% possession compared to 49% possession that the Chicago Fire has. And yeah, overall, I'm not quite sure, both of these teams would be happy coming out of this resort. I mean, for the Chicago Fire, I guess they're happy that they've got 3 points, although I just don't see how this would really benefit them in terms of trying to make the playoffs, considering the fact that they're still 8 points back, and they also have played the most game out of anybody in the Eastern Conference. And as for Houston, like I said, they are having a big problem, and that they are in deep trouble in terms of their chances of making the playoffs. And I also have heard a lot of Dynamos fans said that they think that the season is done and that they're kind of giving up hope in terms of making the playoffs, which I don't blame them, because this is their third straight home loss, and that home games are supposed to be the one that they are supposed to win, and the games that pretty much just carry them into the playoffs. And the fact that now they're not winning them, and also they are going to lose and not get a lot of points on the road. Yeah, this Dynamo team is really screwed right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what they are going to do this off season. And there's been a lot of talk about the fact that Wilmer Cabrera could be getting fired from this team, and that they might even change a new ownership with the way that things have gone. But yeah, for a season that started out so promising for the Dynamo and now just kind of collapsing itself in the second half of the season is definitely very sad to see. But either way, guys, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and like I said, I do apologize for the fact that we had a crazy kind of format where I had to review the last 6 games, and then I reviewed the first 6 games. I mean, I think for fans that, of course, were watching this review, and fans that were part of the first 6 games, you would have thought that you would have saw the games early on, but because of my mistake with the fact that I unfortunately forgot to put the mic on when I first did this, that's why I have to do this on the second clip and had to do later in this review. But either way, guys, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and yeah, I will see you guys next time.